Hello and welcome back to another episode from Driving Britain. Today we're going to be looking at 10 lies Europeans believe about Americans.
I've never seen poverty quite like I've seen in America.
Now everybody knows that we all have some type of idea about what America and American people are like because we watch TV.
In America, spray-on deodorant didn't exist. And I was always like, wow, they should really get spray-on deodorant. I guess they don't use it in films because it goes
And we all know that the TV is a great way to learn about another culture.
Hollywood, as I said, is not that shiny and wonderful.
Assuming that most of the things that we know are completely wrong and that the video is called 10 Lies that Europeans believe about Americans, I guess we're going to be seeing a few things that turn out not to be true. Big surprise. Exactly what we're going to be covering, I really don't know. I've only just come across the video, I've not seen this YouTuber or any of her videos before, don't know what the content's like or anything like that, so I'm going to be seeing it at the same time as you. The video that we're watching is by Diane Jen. Her link is in the description as always. Right, let's get into the video and find out what lies we've been told or led to believe about the American people.
Okay, the first lie that I was told was that Hollywood is full of shiny things and celebrities are just everywhere. I'm going to say it. Hollywood itself is kind of a kip.
Wow, she really went there.
When I was there, I may have seen some celebrities, but they were keeping really low-key and had baseball caps on, so they were very hard to spot. And Hollywood, as I said, is not that shiny and wonderful.
Well, the celebrities, you'd expect them to be keeping a low profile, and they're probably quite difficult to recognise in person as well. We only really see them from kind of front profile, so seeing somebody from the side might be quite difficult to recognise them either way.
Well, the Hollywood sign itself is, I'll be honest, it's kind of a letdown. I guess I pictured Beverly Hills when I thought of Hollywood, but no. The next lie that Europeans are told about America is that it's just full of extremes. And don't get me wrong, it is.
Well, I guess that Hollywood's not quite what it's cracked up to be then. They say never meet your heroes, so I suppose if you've got that view that Hollywood's, the place of stars and glitter and glamour and all the rest of it, and it turns out just to be a pretty normal sort of place where people actually, live, then I guess you're going to be setting yourself up for a little bit of disappointment. But at the same time, because it is such a popular, famous place, you would think that the area would pull out all of the stops to make themselves at least appear like what people expect them to look like. You go to Paris, you get a lot of French bakeries and all the rest of it because people expect to see it. You go to London, you get a lot of tourist stuff that's built around what people kind of expect to see. And I would have expected and thought that Hollywood is exactly the same. The sign a bit dilapidated and not anywhere near as sparkly as what you'd expect. That would be a bit disappointing, and it is a little bit of a surprise. I don't know if I'd say it's a lie, but maybe. What did you think that Hollywood was like? Have you been to Hollywood and is it quite that bad, or is it a lot better than she's making out?
But it's not just extremes. Our perception through the media is that Americans are either really fat or really fit. They're either total jocks or nerds. Stereotypes from movies. And like I said, don't get me wrong, those stereotypes exist for a reason. However, the majority of people are not extremes. They're just regular, in-between people with thoughts and feelings that vary and are nuanced.
Well, I would have expected that anyway. I'm not sure that I expected America just to be extremes. I know that extremes exist, and probably more so in America than any other country. But I'm pretty sure that I expected there to be people in between the two though. Normal everyday people just living life. I'm not sure that that one is a lie because I don't think that I ever expected to only see extremes. I would expect to see extremes, but I'd also expect to see everything in between.
The lie the Europeans are told about America is that you just quit your jobs whenever you want to. And that's again from TV shows and films. People just go, I quit when they're unhappy or having a bad day.
You're fired.
I quit!
You're fired.
I quit.
You're fired! You're fired!
Right, I mean, I already quit, so.
Additionally, we think from the same.
I don't think that Americans necessarily quit the jobs quite often. In fact, they've got some of the worst worker rights out of any Western country. They do more hours, they have less holiday, they don't get sick pay. The wages on the lower end of the market are pretty bad. Waitress staff and stuff like that, they rely on tips because they're literally not even paid minimum wage. So I think that it's the opposite way around. I think that people in America are not just quite loyal to their jobs, but are reluctant to change their jobs. So I think that I believe the exact opposite to what she's saying. Now, if I found that to be untrue, if people really were changing their jobs every 5 minutes, then I would find that bit surprising. Then that would have been a lie to how I would interpret it. But to think that people are quitting their job or being fired every 5 minutes, no, I don't believe that. I don't know what TV she's been watching, but we obviously watch different programmes. She's right though, it is on TV. Like, they do make out that that happens, especially in things like court dramas and cop shows and stuff like that. But I don't think that anybody actually believes that that's real. Well, I didn't think they did.
Sources that you can just go, you're fired out of the blue, and there's no repercussions for that. In fact, a lot of times contracts are...
Well, actually, in American companies, they are a lot more likely to do exactly that. They will just fire you for the stupidest thing, and there is always somebody to take their job. Americans have to put up with a lot worse working conditions than anybody in the UK or pretty much any European country. In fact, the further east you go, then the better the worker rights become. Well, until you kind of heading towards Russia, then maybe things aren't quite the same. I was kind of narrowing it down to the UK and the EU rather than keeping on going until you get back round to the US again. That wasn't really what I had in mind.
Are in place and stuff, and it just doesn't work like that in the real world. On The Apprentice, they do the you're fired, but that's a specific place. The next lie that you are told about America as a European is that everybody in America is obsessed with celebrities, whereas actually the truth couldn't be farther from that. Okay, so in Europe, a lot of our celebrities come from America, so we naturally presume that everybody is completely obsessed with celebrities within America. In actual fact, most people just kind of see their lives and what goes on behind the scenes as a little bit of entertainment, just like we do.
I think there's something like the Kardashians or something like that, then I would expect there to be hype around it in the US and every other country because they are on the TV, not so much nowadays, but they were for quite a while. So people like that, I'd expect there to be hype in all of our countries about those type of people. But if you lived in, say, Hollywood and you had a lot of stars living in the area, then I think that you'd be the opposite. I think that you'd be a lot less likely to react when you saw them because you would see them more often because you live near them. And if you live in America that's not in a main place where stars are, America's so big, you're going to be so far away from where they live and go and shop and that sort of stuff, that I would think that you'd be as emotionally departed from them as what people in the UK and Europe are, because America's huge. If you live 2 or 3 states away from a particular celebrity, you've got just as much chance of bumping into them as what one of us have. Maybe a lot of her friends and herself watch a lot of American TV and that they believe a lot of the stuff that they see on the TV and on Nickelodeon and stuff like that as they're growing up. Maybe they believe that those things are true rather than seeing it as just, well, a TV programme. Because I'm not coming across very many things so far that I think are, well, lies that I believed about America.
One thing I will say is kind of odd as a European, always when I go to America, is seeing on your mainstream news the focus on celebrities within actual serious news programs. We don't really...
Oh yeah, she is right in that sense. In the news feeds and on the news and stuff like that, then you will get a lot more nonsense, I guess you could say, about celebrities fed to the masses through the news groups and everything else. That is a bigger thing in America than in the UK, without question. Because in the UK we just kind of get bored of it really, really quickly, so we don't pay attention to it. But in the US you've also got a lot more TV networks that are trying to compete for every scrap of, you know, gossip and everything else that's going on. And there's a big viewership for gossip type TV in the US. So I don't mean that in a bad way, I mean just that there's a lot of companies aiming at that population. So yeah, they definitely get that a lot more in the US than what we get in the UK and Europe. But again, a lie, not sure about that.
Really have that as much in Europe. I know in the UK they focus a lot on royalty, but you don't tend to see people talking about celebs on news.
Even then, I think that that's a bit of a misnomer. I don't think that most people in the UK give a second thought about the royals. If they do something in particular, or one of them dies or gets married or something, then people pay a bit more attention. But otherwise, on a day-to-day basis, I don't think people even give them a second thought.
The next lie, okay, and this might just be a me thing, but the next lie that
I think most of them so far have been a you thing.
I believed about America before I went to America, and I actually think you're going to probably slag me off for this in comments. I thought that you guys only had roll-on deodorant. I thought you didn't have...
Why would you think that? Where did that even come from?
Because in movies, people always roll on their deodorant, you know, in the changing rooms and stuff. I know you have Old Spice and stuff like that, but...
Yeah, but I think that's just because of the filming part of it. You know, you're not going to stand there with a spray spraying around. You've got all the cameras, all the people and all the rest of it. That's why they use roll-ons, not because they only have roll-ons. I can't believe she even noticed that, let alone think that there's only roll-on deodorant in the US. That's really bizarre. I think that we're learning more about this girl than what we are about the US. It's quite entertaining still, but not what I was expecting.
For some reason, I had it in my head that in America, spray-on deodorant didn't exist. And I was always like, wow, they should really get spray-on deodorant. I guess they don't use it in films because it goes and it would make a noise.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
it's easier to just do the roll-on if you're like shooting a TV scene. You don't have to have the... But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's just a me. If you're from Europe, did you know that spray-on deodorant existed in America? Because I didn't. The next misconception that Europeans have about America is that you're all really rich. And I get why this misconception exists. To be fair, your houses and the land that your houses are on are generally a lot bigger than what we have in Europe for middle class people. Additionally, many people in America live on credit, so a lot of people are living above their means to what they...
Well, isn't that every country? I think that what does kind of stand out though is that American houses are a lot bigger than houses in the UK and Europe. We're a lot smaller countries, there's a lot less land with quite a lot of people, so there is a big difference there. American houses are huge compared to, say, UK houses. And also wages are generally higher in the US than in the UK, but also cost of living is higher in the US. You have to pay for absolutely everything and anything. If somebody can charge you for it in the US, then they do. Even going onto a beach you have to pay. In the UK you don't have to pay to go on the beach. When somebody does any type of job for you, then they'd expect a tip. In the UK, the only people that you might give a tip to is waitress staff in a restaurant. Not the guy who's mowing your lawn or the mechanic that fixes your car or something like that. You only give tips to a very small minority because it's just not a big thing. You're already paying somebody for the job, so why would you then add a tip to it? Also, you have to pay out extortionate money if you have healthcare insurance. Whereas in the UK, we do pay out national insurance through our taxes, so we kind of have to pay out money as well. But I think that you end up paying out a bit more, and when you have to claim on those insurances, you also have to pay quite a lot to go with it. So if you've broken your collarbone and you've got a 12 grand bill for an x-ray, you're probably going to have to stump up 5 grand of that bill. So I think that a lot of the outgoings for Americans are a lot higher than the outgoings for a lot of people in the UK. And also American food is very, very expensive, especially supermarket type food. If you try to buy healthy food, then you're going to be in debt quite quickly because it's really, really expensive. That's why so many people in the US eat out all of the time and get takeaways, because it's just so much cheaper than trying to make it yourself. So I think, the houses are bigger, the wages are higher, but the cost of living overall, pound for pound or dollar for dollar, works out about the same. Our wages are slightly lower, but our outgoings are also lower. Except for petrol, you pay a couple of dollars for a gallon of fuel. We pay nearly $10 for a gallon of fuel. I think it's gone down to the equivalent of about $8.50, $9, somewhere around there now, but it's still really, really expensive.
And the thing about credit in America is you are encouraged to use credit. Like, a lot of things you can't get until you build up credit, which exists in Europe, but it isn't so much focused on. Like, there are other ways to build up your...
Yeah, it's not really advertised in the UK and in Europe, but at the same time, exactly what she said is completely true for all of our countries and all of the people in our countries. You need credit to get credit. If you've never had a credit card and you suddenly want to take out a mortgage, you're going to really struggle. You have to have credit to get credit. And in the US, that is a lot more advertised than in the UK and in Europe. We're not quite so over about money, and that spreads out through to media and stuff as well. So a lot of quick loan adverts on TV. There's a lot of mortgage adverts on TV and stuff like that, but outside of that, there's not really much discussion about it in the UK or in Europe, I think.
And as I've mentioned before, I've never seen poverty quite like I've seen in America. In Europe, of course, there are homeless people, but not in the same way that they are.
If you've watched any of our previous videos, you'll see that we did one about homeless people in America and the size of the homeless population in different states in America. There is huge amounts of homeless in America, way out of proportion to what you would expect. Now, I don't want this to get political or anything like that, but yeah, that is. I was absolutely staggered with what I saw. If you haven't seen it already, click on the link for our channel after you finish watching the video, and then go through the reaction videos, and it should be in there somewhere. Within the next 10 videos, I would think. But it's worth watching, and you will be surprised by what you see. I think I called it something like the homeless states of America. That one will surprise you.
In America, it really shocked me. Because I went over expecting, as I said, pretty much everybody to be super rich, and then I saw people looking like Oliver Twist on the street, and that was a surprise. Additionally, some things in America are a lot cheaper than they are where I come from in Ireland. Ireland has just been named alongside Denmark as the most expensive country in Europe for the cost of living. The prices of goods and services in Ireland are on average 40% higher than they are anywhere else in the EU. And then when I went to America, it was like things were more expensive in some areas but cheaper in other areas. So I was surprised because I thought everything would be the same, if not more expensive when I went there. The next lie that we are told about America,
I think it's that some things like food, necessary things, they're going to be more expensive because they know they've got people cornered. But a lot of other stuff, America's such a big consumer market type country. Everything's built around buy. It doesn't matter whether you need it, buy it anyway, and then you'll worry about whether you need it afterwards. Got a new set of spanners to fix the car, don't worry, get a new set. That's the type of idea it's constantly pushed at you because that's how America keeps its money going. So many things are bought and sold on such a fast pace, and it's needed to keep the country going. And so everybody's kind of brought up in that sort of mindset. Whereas in the UK and Europe, it's not so much. You'll buy what you need rather than in excess. America's all about excess when it comes to that sort of stuff. But for that to happen, then there have to be decent prices. And also, if you're going to be buying something for the second time, you've already got a set of spanners for the car, but these ones are bright orange or they've got a ratchet on them or something. So you're kind of buying something you've already got, but it's just slightly different. Then you're going to need more than it being slightly different to encourage you to buy a second product the same. And so for that sort of reason, then a lot of the different things are better priced. And also, they're just more realistic about things like fuel. They know that people need to drive, they don't try to give them excessive tax on it. Your fuel is pretty cheap. In the UK, they try to provide alternatives to having your own car, public transport, but most people don't like it. And if you live in a city like London, then you've got no choice, you've got to pretty much go with public transport because of the way that they've made it. But anywhere else in the UK, you don't want to use public transport unless you absolutely have to, because nobody wants to, do they? And the government know that. But because they provided you with an alternative, they feel legitimate in charging 50% tax on fuel. In fact, I think it's way above that now.
America, and this should come as no surprise, and I don't want to get bogged down in the discussion too much, but it's that everybody there has pew-pews. And they don't. Not everybody does. In fact, it's a very divided country on people's opinions about that, but people have very...
I thought that was just down to a couple of states, really. A few of the southern states were a lot more, Texas and so on, they're a lot more likely to be inclined to do that. Go towards New York or San Francisco and stuff like that, then you're really going to struggle to see that as a regular thing. So I think that that's very state dependent, and even then you're only really on about a couple of states. For normal owners, then that's a lot more widespread throughout the US. But people kind of overtly carrying or anything like that, then that's very state dependent. Not just because of the laws, but because people believe different things in different states.
Very strong opinions about that, and I'm going to swiftly move on. I just thought that every single person would have one when I went there, and that's not the case. The next lie that Europeans are told about America is that pretty much teenagers run America, if media was to be believed, and movies and TV shows. In actual fact, I have still not seen a cheerleader when I've gone to America. I have never been invited to a prom or homecoming, and that seems like an integral part of your society from film and TV. So, yeah, I know movies and TV shows aren't real, but I definitely thought that teenagers would have a more central role in America as a result of watching so many of them. The next lie that...
I'm not sure that most people believe that teenagers would run America. And I'm really not sure why she would have that idea other than through watching kids programs on Nickelodeon. But with them being kids programs on Nickelodeon and not a documentary, I would have thought that she probably would have been able to tell the difference. But maybe I'm wrong. Put in the comments what you think.
What we are told about America is that you guys eat fast food constantly. And that actually could not be further from the truth. Americans, more so than anywhere else in the world, love to cook. Americans love to barbecue. It's like your thing. You're like, my grill, my barbecue, you're mad for cooking. There is...
Yeah, I don't think it's fast food as in McDonald's fast food that people are actually really thinking of, or that happens a lot within the US. It's the pre-packaged type stuff. That's what's a lot cheaper. To try and buy farm fresh foods or milk that's pretty much straight from a cow, or potatoes that's directly out of the ground, that's where you're really going to pay high prices in the US. So that's the sort of stuff that people are generally going to be buying because it's so expensive. So you might not be buying McDonald's type fast food, but fast food's a lot more popular because the prices are so much lower than trying to cook yourself all of the time, especially if you're cooking for one or two. And then the pre-packed type foods, that's going to be the middle marker. The amount of people in the US, like the UK as well though really, that's using very fresh home-cooked produce for everyday meals, I don't think that that's the majority in either of our countries because it's just too expensive, and definitely more so in the US. Food prices for fresh food type produce in the US is just extortionate.
There's fast food on every corner in America, so that's where the perception comes from. It's a lot easier to get your hands on, but most Americans don't eat fast food every single day. You cook for the most part. I definitely thought Americans just ate TV dinners and fast food constantly, and
TV dinners and fast food constantly. She's got a really high opinion of everybody in America, hasn't she?
cooking was like something you did at family events. The next lie that we were told about America is that your breakfasts are crazy. Like, you eat waffles and pancakes and cereal every single morning. You have a full feast for breakfast every day.
So yay! Enjoy smelling breakfast.
In fact, I think most Americans probably live on just the same kinds of breakfast as most of us Europeans do. Of course, we have Irish breakfast, you have American breakfast, which consists of waffles and pancakes. They do exist. I think our general day breakfasts cross over. You might have a bowl of porridge, a bowl of cereal.
I think American breakfast and American food is a lot more sugary. Yeah, if you look at Cheerios in the US versus, say, Cheerios that you can now get in the UK, the UK almost look like a black and white version compared to the American version. Mountain Dew, you know, we get saccharin instead of sugar. I don't think there's even any caffeine left in there. American breakfast and American foods tend to be a lot more sugary and a lot more deep fried more often than what you'd probably get in a lot of other countries, but definitely more sugary, and the breakfasts are where that begins. So I think that that's probably true, but the amount of food that people eat for breakfast, well, it's breakfast. How much food are you going to be able to eat? I'm not sure that I thought that they'd eat anything different to, well, most of the people on Earth, really. Well, most of the people in a Western type country.
I definitely thought it was like America-themed breakfast every single day, whereas that's not really sustainable. And
Well, I suppose Americans believe that the British eat an English breakfast every single day, but it's obviously not something that's done. You might have one once a month if you're lucky. Whereas usually we just end up having cereals or maybe pancakes or something like that. So I guess it's the same. We think that everybody's eating better stuff than what we're eating.
you would be carrying a lot of extra weight if you ate that every single day. I would love to have American breakfast every single day, but it's not a good idea. Although the same could be said for Irish breakfast. You should not eat Irish breakfast every single day, because to be honest, after I have an Irish breakfast, it's delicious, but it slows me down. I like to have a little nap after an Irish breakfast. The next lie we're told about America, and there's truth in this one, but not as much as I had thought, is that you will go around suing each other constantly. America is an extremely litigious country, but I think that's also due to the proportion of people compared to everywhere else in the world. Like, if there's more...
I don't know, America do sue each other way more and way out of proportion to any other country, I think. And it is starting to spread towards the UK in many different ways. Luckily, it's happening quite slowly, but America's definitely a sue society.
More people somewhere, there's going to be more people suing people, right? But the impression that we are given of Americans is that if you bang your head on something, you're going to sue the company that built that something. Whereas the truth is, most times when something happens, people just let it go unless there's like serious ramifications, I definitely did think people just went around suing each other. I don't think that this is not fueled by the urban myths that are created on the internet. For example, there's that urban myth about the woman in America who sued McDonald's because her coffee was too hot, whereas if you actually go and look that up, the truth is that woman was actually really badly injured and that the coffee was way hotter than it should have been. But people like these extravagant headlines, and it makes Europeans think that Americans do just go around being like, you're sued, you're sued, you're sued. And also I thought that every American just had a lawyer on standby, because when you see things, again, people go, call my lawyer. Most people don't just have a lawyer to call. You generally have to research that. Let me know below.
They're expensive, so why would you? Unless you've got a need, you're not going to have somebody on retainer that's going to be expensive. Unless you're somebody that gets in trouble quite often. Then you might have, but most people, pretty doubtful. As for the suing thing, I think it is a really big thing in America and much bigger than any other country. But to think that everybody's suing each other constantly just for the slightest reason, I think that that's a bit overboard.
In comments if you want to see the other way round version of this, lies Americans are told about Europe, because it's a...
Okay, she is obviously at the end of her video. What did you think about that? If you're from the UK or Europe, did you come across a whole load of lies or 10 lies that you thought that you'd been told about America that turned out not to be true? Or do you think that a lot of these things are just what that girl just happened to think? Maybe her and her friends watch a lot of American TV and they've taken it a bit too seriously, and so they believe some things that just aren't true? Or is it just that perhaps I've had a lot more exposure to American stuff, so I find it pretty obvious that some things just aren't true? Do you think she's right that they are 10 things that Europeans believe about Americans? Or do you think it's more likely 1 or 2 things that Europeans believe about Americans? Do you think she was right? Was that 10 lies that Europeans believe about Americans? Add it to the comments how many of those things that you already knew, or how many things that turned out that you believed but wasn't true. Okay, thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to click the thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed already, please do.
It's a long list. I gotta cut that one down, to be honest.
Okay, thank you for watching.